Hi, I'm Philippe, but you can call me Fipe. I'm a game developer, and when your industry looks like this, it's time to work on some personal projects. So I'm making an indie game. This is my devlog for a dice-rolling roguelike I'm building. Think Slay the Spire, but instead of building a deck of cards, you build an arsenal of dice by adding faces you collect to them and modifying the dice as a whole. This gives the player the deck-building aspect of crafting and honing their dice, as well as player agency on how to roll and re-roll them, and try and land certain combos. The theme is going to be gothic and filled with decay. We're taking some pages from Darkest Dungeon and Elden Ring here, where eldritch gods are clasping at their last straws of power, trying to do anything to remain relevant. That's it for the elevator pitch, but for now, let's meet the team developing this. We've got the developer, me. The animator, me. The 3D modeler, me. And the composer. This could be you. So what does a typical gameplay loop look like? Well, I had this completely original idea where a player loads into a game and is presented with a map.
A map? A map? A map of the wonders of the new world.
This map will have multiple branching paths that lead to various event nodes that then will culminate into fighting the boss of that level. This will happen multiple times until the player fights a final boss. Along the way, some of the nodes the player will encounter will include fights, events where they need to pick what to do, shops to spend their hard-earned money, and resting points where they can tweak their dice or craft new ones. If this sounds familiar, it's because I totally ripped this entire idea from Slay the Spire, and I'm completely using their map idea. It's like the old saying goes, hippity-hoppity, nice intellectual property. Now you might be asking yourself, what's the secret sauce that's going to make the players enjoy the game? What's going to make me want to come back? I need to know if it's worth spending my time. And that's building crazy dice combo, babies. We're talking game dev juice until this is satisfying as hell. Rolling the dice should be the best part of your day. And that's already great because it's kind of like gambling. And everyone likes gambling. But we're going to add sounds that crescendo up every time you roll something of the same face. Doom, 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 doom. That key going up. It's going to make you feel good. You're going to see particles flying towards your player. You're going to see number go up every time. There's going to be crazy combos, and you're goddamn right there'll be infinite combos that you can fish for. But the idea is that we're just going to steal what happens in Balatro, because that fucking pops the fuck off, and that makes players feel great. Hell yeah. Anyways, I'll be making this in Unity, since it's the engine I've spent the most time working in and I'm most comfortable in. And I've got some assets to really help me make this project sort of pop stylistically. The main goal is just a playable demo to gauge interest in this concept as a whole, and to avoid scope creep like the plague. The first thing you'll need in a dice roller roguelike is a dice, believe it or not. So we start with a cube, round the corners, and throw a shader on it that shades it in steps and pixelizes it with an outline.
Whoa, 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 oh la la.
Now, this might not look impressive now, but it does pop off when I throw it in an environment I quickly threw together. We also built a basic combat loop, using the feel from Darkest Dungeon, and yossed it into the mix too. They say imagery is the most sincere form of flattery. We also have these sexy little particles that fly towards the player from each dice face that powers them up. I haven't added in sound effects yet, but please enjoy these edited in ones to really get the full effect of what we're going for. And there you have it, a basic combat loop. The player rolls dice, picks an enemy to smack and smacks them. The enemies tell you what they're gonna do during their smacking and smack you back. Simple, easy, to the point. We all know that person that plays video games and likes to be a loot goblin. So we're gonna help those guys out a little bit right here. We're gonna add in an inventory so they can see their currently earned dice faces, as well as a reward screen so that they can pick and choose their rewards after a combat. It's worth noting here that none of this is the final look for the UI. It's just currently in prototyping, and I'm sitting around trying to gray box to get a good feel of what works, what doesn't, sizing-wise, flow-wise, and eventually I'm going to cement the art style that we're going to figure out for this in the future. But for now, enjoy my handy little paintwork I did. The inventory will be made up of a bunch of draggable panels with dice faces in them that will interact with whatever they're dropped on. This will be used later down the line for making and editing dice. The reward screen is just going to be a list of various buttons that's tied to different dice faces that the player earned during combat. The player can then pick and choose from all their rewards on what they want to keep and what they want to discard. The next piece of the puzzle we're going to tackle is an explorable map. We're going to need to make an algorithm that generates a playable map for the player to explore. The map should be filled with various nodes in varying rows that are all connected by lines. Some of the nodes we'll need are combat nodes and their counterparts elite combat nodes, event nodes, resting nodes, shop nodes, and a boss node for the end of the level. I quickly prototyped some icons for these, and now we can begin with map creation. Here are the rules that the map creation algorithm is going to have to follow. A row of nodes can vary in how many nodes there are. There must always be a path forward from each node to the end and final node. The path should combine and split, but never cross. The final node is obviously going to be a boss fight. And each node should be a button that loads its corresponding event when the player clicks on it. And the player should only be able to click on the nodes that are directly ahead of them in the map that are connected by lines. Anyways, I thought this whole process would be difficult, but then I found this button, and it just generated all this code for me, so crazy how that works. Picture this. You've been grinding away for 4 hours killing goblins and amassed a huge pile of gold. Now you may be asking, how do I get to spend this money, Fipe? How can I experience the highs and lows of capitalism in your game if I can't spend my hard-earned cash?
Shut up and take my money!
So in the spirit of capitalism, I'm adding income taxes. Well, no, JK, it's a shop. And dice faces is what we're adding. You can spend money on dice faces and in a shop. It was always going to be that. Here's what the shop will need. We'll need dice faces with stock that can go on sale and be sold out if the player buys all of them. The player will need to be able to heal in exchange for some of their money. And the player will also need to be able to buy entire dice with their hard-earned money. I'll need to code some sort of dice renderer that appears in the UI so that the player can inspect a dice, move it around, grab it, flip it, spin it around, and also have buttons on the side that show the dice's current faces that the player can click on to go to that face. Naturally, the final step of the shop, once the UI is all done, is making sure that it randomly populates with random dice and dice faces every time we open it so that it changes from time to time. Next up is to build the player's rest node. This is going to act as like the Dark Souls bonfire of the game, where they'll be able to modify their dice, create a new die, heal, or remove cursed faces they may have added onto their dies through events. First, let's create a starting menu that then opens other submenus for the player to interact with. One of the options is Modify Dice. Here you'll be able to spend those hard-earned dice faces, tweaking dice to your liking, and allowing you to build up the strategy you want to pull off this run. I'm going to name this action Temper Dice since it sounds badass, like you're modifying these ancient glyphs into a magical device that's granting you power. Next, I'm going to create the healing option. This one was kind of a joke, since I already had all the logic that existed for taking away money from the player and adding health. It took me about 30 seconds to make. The final option was that's not the final option. Another option was forging a new die. This one required that the player had enough dice faces to do the alleged action, which is, believe it or not, 6. After the player picked which 6 dice faces they wanted to add, the die would be created and assigned the faces based on what the player selected from their inventory and then added to the arsenal. I had to add a money cost to this though, because there's really never a case where you didn't want to just create a new die instead of modifying an old one, since you just get to roll more faces with that new die. Simple maths, everyone knows that 6 is more than 5, so why wouldn't you just want 6 rolled dice faces instead? The solution to this was to make it cost money. Capitalism strikes again. 100 gold, please. The final option I have is to remove all cursed dice faces from your dice. This currently does absolutely nothing since I have not added in cursed faces yet, so that's a later me problem.
To avoid scope creep like the plague.
Now I need to make an event. A player can arrive at an event and be presented with multiple choices. They then pick one. It's like a test where if you fail, you die, but if you win, you're rewarded with a little treat. And who doesn't like a little treat? Some choices are guaranteed to be available, while others are locked behind requirements, such as having enough gold or having certain dice faces. Some choices will have multiple outcomes based on a roll that is aided by certain dice faces. This adds a little uncertainty and risk to them that can then be played around by having more of that dice face. Essentially, an event is just a list of options, and each option has a list of potential outcomes. Outcomes can give rewards to the player, damage them, start another event that then is immediately resolved, start a combat, or place another event into a pool of events that will happen in the future. This will help keep the game feeling very fresh and fun, since each event will have a different outcome, allowing the player to learn what events are good to interact with based on their player knowledge and allowing them to basically conquer the game that way. This is probably going to end up being a bottleneck in development, since I'm going to need a lot of art for these, and I'm not that good of a digital painter or pixel artist. But I'm sure we'll be able to optimize the process somehow. So anyways, that's the project so far. We still got a long road ahead of us though, because there's many milestones I want to reach, and here are some of them in no particular order you could expect on the next video. I want temporary curses that sit on a dice and linger there until they get removed. So maybe as an outcome of an event, you get a curse that adds a random curse face on your die that's really bad. I also like the idea of having entire dice that are just cursed, or godlike dice that are just crazy powerful that you can get as a reward for one of your events that you go through. I also want to add in buffs that last for a certain amount of time in combat. So like a player could buff themselves up with strength and receive more damage for the remainder of combat and things like that. More dice faces to support these, like a main menu, an option menu, and just really figuring out my art style of where I want to go with this game. That's some things to look forward to in the next one. Thank you so much for listening to me prattle about my little project I got going on here. I hope to see you at the next one. You know the drill, lads. Like, comment, subscribe, and let me know what you'd like to see in the game if you think of anything cool. Cheers. Doodles.